What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with the one, the only, the certified fantabulous, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are here to finally record the Knicks offseason look ahead. If you're looking for coaching talk, we did something separate on that because that will or already has been dated by this point. So you can go check that out. Grant, before we belly flop in to the Knicks' offseason vitals, how the heck are you doing?
I know this is related to the coaching thing that we're not going to talk about, but we did ask around to a lot of other podcast hosts that were already employed to see if they could do the Knicks offseason preview, but we were rebuffed at every turn. So you're stuck with us.
I think next time we should maybe go look at more up-and-comers that are more likely to say yes, like a Bill Simmons, like someone who's really trying to cut their teeth and get their start, might be willing to come on here.
We need someone to innovate, really.
The guiding question here is, though, as we get into this, is how close are the Knicks to winning an NBA title? They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then they fired their head coach, which suggests that they believe they're pretty darn close. And that's not, you made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. In theory, you're pretty darn close. The East is only going to get more wide open. But I think the danger here, and this is the bigger thing we're going to talk about, is to think that it was just the head coach that was the problem. And Tibbs was a problem. I don't think he was the biggest problem. But you have to ask yourself, well, how do they get better from here? Leading us into their offseason vitals, which are, it's going to get a little sticky, folks. So they project to start out around $3.8 million below the first apron, and that's about $8 million below the second apron. They must stay below the second apron to use the mid-level exception of $5.7 million. That is their best spending tool if they can access it. This projection includes 11 players under contract. So if you fill out the roster with minimums, you don't have the full mid-level exception to use. Now, they do have that PJ Tucker non-guarantee deal that will shave money off, but then you're still creating an open roster spot, and PJ Tucker's contract can be valuable because if the Knicks make a trade, they basically have to send out more money than they're receiving. And so just throwing PJ Tucker's minimum into the equation is the way to do that. They do not have a real first-round pick to trade. If I hear one other person pitch me on the Wizards' first rounder as having value, it is top 10 protected, and then it turns into 2 seconds. You can bet on those seconds being in the 30s. That's great. It's not a first-round pick. They can also trade swaps, original swaps. They could trade swaps of the swaps if anyone's interested, but they have swaps they could deal in 26, 2030, and 2032. Before we kind of dig into kind of extensions, targets, big questions, what do you think of the idea? Like, if you're a team that has extra first-rounders, and then also what do you think about this from the Knicks' perspective? Forget about the 2026 swap, the Knicks are going to be too good. But if you're the Nets, or if you're a team that's just like the Oklahoma City at this point, would you give up a real first-round pick for the right to swap with the Knicks in 2030 or 2032? Like a more imminent first-rounder. Like Brooklyn, where do they have 4 first-round picks in this year's draft? Are you giving 27 and 28 or whatever it is that they have to get a distant swap from the Knicks?
Yeah, I think I would, but it'd need to be. I don't think I'd give up a pick I was confident was going to be a lottery pick, for example. Obviously not like a top, somewhere in the 20s, I think makes sense just to bet on the upside. And it would probably need to be a team like the ones you mentioned that have they have a volume of assets. And then the move from there is to be how do we turn these into fewer that have massive upside potentially. If you could get an unprotected swap in 2030 or 32 from the Knicks, maybe that's a number 1 pick or whatever. I'm giving up stuff in the 20s for that. Who knows, right? I think that's about the range. But if it's I don't know why they're on my mind, but the Spurs have 14 right in this draft in addition to number 2. It's I think I'd rather just have 14 probably. But
what if the Knicks were in theory, though, what if the Knicks, and this could go for any team, were swap, and you probably want to be a good, if you're the Bulls, you really think that you're going to be better than anyone in 2030? Probably not.
You'll be better than roughly half the teams in the league, but that's the best you can do.
I am curious as to even if it's in a trade where you're trying to extract value for teams to send to another team, if they were just including the 2030 and 2032 swaps on the table, I really feel like you could get teams to facilitate something. You're not going to get, to your point, you're not going to get the Jazz's number 5 pick for that. I'm not under that delusion. But I think when you look at the way the Knicks are built right now, they're not old, but they're not super young. They can keep this core intact, but they're going to run into in a couple years if, looking at the Karl-Anthony Towns and OG Anunoby salary specifically, they are, and Mikal Bridges coming up on an extension. We're going to talk about that. They are going to have some realities that will kneecap them logistically. So I think that those swaps are probably worth more than people have credited, but the Knicks also, it depends on what the coaching situation and their ethos is, but what does actually moving those swaps for current first-round picks actually do? Yes, it's cost-controlled talent, but are you going to play that talent? It's not like you try to develop Pacome Dadier and Tyler Kolek, and that was probably, I'm not saying either one of them were the answers, but I think that was actually probably a pretty underrated like flaw of the Knicks, is that when you look at, so PBP, play-by-play stats has these like low leverage and medium leverage minutes filters, and that's ostensibly like the possessions in a game that are going to impact the outcome of winning the least. And the Knicks were like, did not play a lot of those possessions. I think they were 24th, like combined. That's not like great shakes. No. And it means that in theory, you weren't good enough to, even if you wanted to develop your players, you didn't have the margin for error to throw in some of those youngsters. And so I think that's part of the calculus too, if you did look at moving these swaps for cost control talent now.
Now, before we move on, I speaking of like the rookies and the Landry Shamits of the world and different guys that like shockingly emerged like late in the postseason run, do you think, because the core question is like how good is this team really? Like, do you think there's a case to be made whether through the organic growth of the rookies, if given the opportunity, or just deeper bench use, and presumably a new coach would use more of his bench than Thibodeau because nobody uses less? Like, is there an argument to be made that the Knicks could be better just through those avenues, or is the difference too marginal for that to be like for the Knicks to say like, we're not going to make big swings? We think we can get more out of the deeper parts of this roster than we have. And because we were very, very close to making the finals, that's enough. Like, is there any chance that that's what someone's saying within the organization?
I think you probably have to guarantee that Landry Shamet remains healthy and plays, and then the same thing for Mitchell Robinson, who's a bigger piece to that puzzle, because then that deepens your rotation by two bodies that you didn't have available for most of the regular season. Okay. But in terms of, I don't see it necessarily with Pacome Dadier, but again, we haven't seen a ton of him. Tyler Kolek, if you're looking at, we don't want to have to worry about campaign minutes, like maybe that's someone who could come in and fill that up. But I think it's just, the thing that I keep getting caught up on with the Knicks is the lack of a consistent, and even if you want to say conventional number two option. It's Towns by default, and he did some special things in the lineups without Jalen Brunson this year, but he's not consistent enough to, I feel like, wear that hat. And so that puts you in a situation where I guess you can improve on the margins enough, but unless could you argue that OKC doesn't have a conventional number two scorer at this point, or a dependable one? But it's like, well, when their options are Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, it feels like that's different than having Mikal Bridges and even Towns. Because even look at the Pacers, like they have Siakam. So I don't think it's far-fetched to say that organically their rotation could be deeper and therefore the Knicks are better. Mm-hmm. But like doesn't that, unless you disagree, doesn't that feel like more of a marginal thing?
It does. I just was asking because like I think that informs how, like, desperate's too strong a word, although I mean maybe not, but just how aggressive they're going to be improving the top end of the roster. If that's the route they go, if there's a cat trade out there or whatever, like because all of that stuff is like super high risk, and I don't know if you want to be taking these massive swings when you're this close to being good enough. And so like if you really did, as the Knicks believe, God, if we could have got 1,000 minutes out of like these two other guys over the course of the year, maybe that's enough for our best players to just be a 2% fresher or whatever. Like, because then it would just your opinion on that side of it, I think, informs how you believe they should conduct business, like big decision wise, top of the roster wise, money wise this offseason.
So we'll get into targets, what the biggest needs, but let's first start with two just notable extension candidates. The biggest one is Mikal Bridges. Did you want to take us through his options?
Yeah, so he is eligible to sign a 4-year, $156.2 million extension, which is about 20% of the salary cap, which thank you for putting that in there because I do need to just get off of the raw numbers because they don't make sense to me anymore.
They're so high.
I know. It's really hard.
Wait until you see the Karl-Anthony Towns number on our next.
Is one of the numbers going to start with a 7? It almost has to, right? So like, So then the question is, when you're trying to sort of calculate, like, is from either side, is that a fair number? Would either side be happy with that? Uneven this season, does that pave the way for him to take less? Is this a Jalen Brunson like setting a tone type of thing which honestly to me, that Brunson thing does carry some weight, because you really can say as the Knicks, like, he did it. Are you better than him? Like, I don't know. And Brunson could apply.
What did OG Anunoby say last summer when
That's
they
true.
mentioned
That is a counterexample. But he didn't go to Villanova, so it's very different. So he's also, this is maybe the kicker, and what we should really be focused on is, so you got that 4 for 156 on the one hand, or could be maxed out in 2026 free agency. 4 years from the Knicks would net Bridges 228.6. 5 years from the Knicks, $296 million. 4 years from anybody else, 219.4. You can kind of think of this in similar terms to what the Pacers were looking at with Pascal Siakam, right? Where it was like they could offer the 5th year, nobody else could. So like maybe what you look at is that what could an outside team offer him for 4 years? That's as high as we need to go as the Knicks. Mm-hmm. But for Bridges, it's, do you want the 4 years locked up now, or do you want to go into free agency in 26?
And I've seen a lot of fans just say that you can't sign him to the extension unless he's willing to take less than it. Am I wrong here saying that if he's willing to sign that extension, if you can get him for less, great, sign it, because there's gonna, like, the player that Mikal Bridges is right now, I don't think he'll get maxed out by anybody, but I absolutely positively believe that someone will give him more than 4 years and $156 million next summer.
I think that's right, and I think you are still, well, one, if you 4 for 156, he's a tradable asset for positive value. I think at that number,
I would agree.
Not 5 first round picks, but we just kind of have to, like, that you can't.
Well, no,
sort of
because the Suns
him.
are looking for a comparable return for Kevin Durant that they gave up for him. So that's 4 unprotected firsts, 1 swap, Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, and then whatever they ended up getting for Jay Crowder as well.
Right. So the market's been set. No, I think you're right. It does feel like there's some sticker shock there. It's like 20% of the cap makes it seem a little easier to handle. But you do just sort of need to view it from the Knicks' perspective, from the standpoint of, like, somebody else is going to offer more than that if you wait till 26, I think.
And if they don't, what went wrong next season would be my question.
If somebody's not willing to do that, then you might have overpaid at 4 for 156 because something went sideways. But yeah, I think, and then if I'm Bridges, I don't know. I might want to see if somebody wants to get me over $200 million.
That's what I was going to say. I wonder if for the Knicks then, unless it was part of the calculus in giving up so much for him that he was always going to sign this extension and that was the value of giving up so many picks. Or did it work out in your favor? And both could be true, I guess, where because his season was so uneven that he is now going to sign the extension, like, rather than because if you're him, it's if he has another season like he does, if this is the player Mikal Bridges is right now, he's the exact same season, it's probably iffy. I'd still guess, though, that he gets more because it only takes one team, and there's going to be, right now, there's one team that's going to have cap space. There's going to be, I would say, at least a half dozen teams next summer, unless something changes. They're going to be working with cap space. The Heat could be one of them. So I just look at this and say, if he's going to sign the extension, and if I had to guess, I'm curious what you think, I think it just ends up being the max. 4 years and 156. I think it gets done this summer. If it doesn't, because if I'm Mikal Bridges, I'm actually probably not signing it. Like, I'd go into the open market, and I would think that at worst, the Knicks will offer me that same amount of money next year. So, but if he doesn't sign it, if you're the Knicks, like, you need to have some internal discussions about, or are we prepared to, like, if he goes into free agency and he gets, 4 for 200, are you prepared to go to the 5th year like you did for OG, or just give him more over the like, if he doesn't sign it, I think there's real awkward questions that need to be asked.
And not only that, but then as the Knicks, you're in the position of, like, well, so now we got to think about trading him, and suddenly you get into the whole thing of, like, well, so now you can't trade him. Teams aren't going to offer much for him if they know the reason that he wasn't signed is because he wants to go into free agency in 26. So what are we giving up for a potential rental? Like, if you do get to the point where we can't agree at 4 for 156, and the reason that's true is because, like, one, maybe he's not super sure he wants to be here, and two, he thinks he can get more. It's like you might have to think about moving him, and that gets really difficult. Like, I think 4 for 150. Given all, now that we've talked it through, given all the like potential downsides and risks of him not signing that, the Knicks really need to hope they can get him at that max number now, because I think if you push this to 26, it just everything gets worse for them.
Another extension candidate, Grant, and I'm interested to throw this scenario at you, so I'll take us through it. Karl-Anthony Towns can sign a 2-year, $149.8 million extension that would kick in during his during the 28-29 season when he's 33. That would bring his total commitment, this is the number, to 5 years, $321.1 million. That's a lot of money. I think logic dictates the Knicks do absolutely nothing. But what if they did something like this? If they got him his player option in the final year of this contract, in 2027, 2028, is $61 million. You're Karl-Anthony Towns. You're sitting here saying, I am going to be like, all right, in my mid-30s at that point, like early to mid-30s. Do I try to lock in 3 years of like pretty big money by declining that player option now and re-signing for a lower average annual value? Because what that does in theory is, as it starts to get harder for the Knicks to keep everything rolling, Karl-Anthony Towns' number gets lower sooner. So you have Karl-Anthony Towns for the next 2 years at his current number, but then once you get to 27, 28, when it's supposed to be $61 million, it dips. Now, I think I tried to confirm this and I couldn't. I think the most his salary could dip by if he declines his player option and accepts less is like 40%. So it's like he's not going to take 40. He's not slashing his salary in half. No. But I'm just curious as to like, is there a number that, because they can't, if they sign him to a 2-year, $150 million extension, everyone in that front office deserves to be fired. I'm sorry. Like, you could extend him next summer if he has a great year. But I'm just wondering, is there like a number where, again, you're knowing you have that $61 million in that third year. So what would a 3-year extension look like for Karl-Anthony Towns and the Knicks that would get both sides thinking, does this make sense? Like, how low, let's frame it this way, how low does that number in 27, 28 need to drop for you to think about, like, is $50 million? If he says, yeah, I'll do 3 and 150.
This is absurd, because that is the exact number first of all, I was gonna hem and haw and say, like, who know 27, 28, like, we already can't wrap our heads around the money now. If you're giving up $61 million, so then that's like, all right, so does that, to sign for 3 for 150, does that, so then otherwise, like, versus picking up that option for 61, and then you just need 2 for 90 after that to like break even.
Yeah.
I mean, if Towns is in the position of signing like 1+1s that soon, that's a problem. I mean, for him, I guess, but like, I think couldn't it also be the case that 3 for 150 just becomes a good deal for him because maybe he has another season like this one where, man, like, look at those numbers during the year, and then in the playoffs you're just like, not consistent enough, like the defense isn't there, he's not a center, like all that stuff's not going to change, right? Like, we're not going to find ourselves a year from now or 2 years from now thinking like, isn't the evolution of Karl-Anthony Towns remarkable? Like, he's a great rim protector, he fits on any team, like he plays center full time, it's great. Like, so from his perspective, maybe that does just beat the market, and it's worth it to the Knicks to just have someone at that number. I don't know. 3 for 150 does seem reasonable, but like, I mean, who knows? Who knows what it's like the next 2 years are going to hold?
And I think I honestly don't know, because when you say 3 for 150 when he's basically eligible for 2 and 150 now, it sounds ridiculous, but you have to try and project forward on the market, and I really do think. I thought Jaren Jackson Jr. was going to be the case study, and now that he's not All-NBA, that he's not Supermax eligible, he won't be. I don't know if it's Trae Young, who's not Supermax eligible, it's just a regular extension. I think in the era of aprons, the bar for max players, especially when you're getting into the 35% max territory, or even the 30% territory, the fun maxes, the rookie scales, sure. I think it's going to be higher. And so I'm kind of waiting for, like, because if Jaylen Brown was Supermax eligible this summer, and throw the Jason Tatum injury out the window, I don't think he gets it.
No way. No, I think you're dead on. That has to be the way things go, because if it isn't, then you're just, I think teams now are like sufficiently afraid of the second apron and all the restrictions it imposes. So like, Jackson would have been a great test case. I think we'll get somebody else before Towns probably, but maybe like Durant. Isn't Durant going to be eligible for like a 2 for 114 or whatever? Like
2 for 122 or 2 for 124, depending on when. Yeah.
Yeah. So if Towns is a test case, then the answer to the test will be there's no chance he's getting 2 for 149. Like never in a million years.
I don't think if he's not willing to do the decline, the player option, and lower salary enough, he's definitely not getting an extension. So I don't actually think he's going to be a case study. I'm wondering if he wants to get out in front of being a case study, because it's like, could we guarantee, let's let this contract end. And so you're saying if 3 for 150 was on the table, you mentioned you need to do 2 for 90 at that point. I know the cap is going up. Are you sure that Karl-Anthony Towns at the age of 33 is getting 2 for 90 at that? I don't know that you can be. And
no, I'm not sure at all.
Yeah. And especially if we're Karl-Anthony Towns, look, they're not the same player, but like if the Hawks aren't willing to give Trae Young like a max extension now, like at the 4 years and the 220s or whatever it's worth, like that's like him and Towns are kind of on the same level of player, right? Where it's like in any given season they could be an all-NBA player. You might say Towns is just better because he's more of an anomaly at his position. I don't need to get into the debate, but like they're kind of in the same bucket of if you just chopper them into the open market, like which teams are tripping over themselves to get them? Or if you put them on the trade block right now, what teams are tripping over themselves to get them? I think for the Knicks, it just could be something to explore. I ultimately think, and I recognize that I might just be a little lower on the situation now, even if it was 3 for 150 and I'm the Knicks, I'm probably like, no, you know what? The AAV needs to drop below $50 million a year. That's probably unrealistic.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I just like, we're getting there was a minute there where it's like, if you're our very best player and we're half decent, you're just getting the max extension because we don't want to, that's valuable to us. And now it's almost like, yeah, you'll get the max extension if half the league would also give it to you. Like if that were possible to test. And I think, yeah, no, the bar is just higher. You're right about that.
Grant, do you want to take us through some of the Kevin Durant stuff?
Yeah, and the question, Dan, is should they be in on him? I will answer with a resounding yes. I think if it were him for Cat straight up, if that were actually possible, I think they're just a better team. So the cleanest construction of a hypothetical trade does involve sending out Cat plus a smaller salary. Things to keep in mind here: Katie's gonna be 37 in September. Just per minute, still pretty phenomenal. I think maybe some of the luster has worn off. Just another team change probably coming up. He's gonna be traded. He will, as I jumped ahead, he's gonna be eligible to sign a 2-year, $122 million extension. Could be 124 if he waits 6 months after changing teams. The total commitment then, if you trade for him and then extend him, would be 3 years and between 177 and 179. That would take him through his age 39 season. Towns, for comparison's sake, is at 3 years, 171 million through his age 32 season. So seven years younger. God, Katie's getting up there. That's unbelievable. We haven't talked about this. If Katie's on the table and you're not throwing in a bunch of sweeteners one way or the other, I think he makes the Knicks better than Towns. We haven't talked about it though. I'm curious what you think about that.
I agree, and you should know how I think because I was writing about a 4-team trade, and it basically ended with the Knicks giving up Cat, a 2028 pick swap, which people were up in arms about. That pick's already been swapped, so it's just like
swap of a swap.
It's a swap of a swap, and PJ Tucker to bring in Kevin Durant, and I think the merits of this go a couple different ways. Everything you outlined, and I do agree that like the sheen of Kevin Durant, if you're expecting him to elevate players around him, shoulder more of the playmaking, maybe even just handle all these double teams, he won't. But he's still just a better number 2 scorer than Karl-Anthony Towns. And the reason you have Karl-Anthony Towns is because of the scoring punch, and the flexibility he gives you in spacing. If you're already thinking about, do we need to play him next to another big, you've already kind of just like, the experiment is not what you thought it would be. And if you really believe that you can build a championship caliber defense around Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns playing together, then no, you don't make that move. I know Kevin Durant's older, but there's also something in me. By the way, he's a defensive upgrade. They play different positions.
Inside 6 feet, Kevin Durant's field goal percentage allowed is like 8 percentage points lower than Cat's last year. It's like it's not even really that close.
And it's just easier. So if you get rid of Towns, it's easier if you're using the mini-mid level or even minimums, you're going to get a big it's just easier to find maybe a rotation big than it would be. Like, man, we could really use another ball handler or someone who could come in and pump in 20 points a game or something like that. What's also intriguing, and I'm not saying he would do this. This is all something that needs to be factored in. This has become our mantra. We're just asking questions. We're just saying things, Grant. He's on an expiring contract, and we're writing those extension numbers. But like, what if he's just like gonna take less? I'm not a big fan of, or like, and very rarely do you see players, if the max is available, taking a bunch less. But like, he's turning 37 in September. Would he just say, like, I'll do 2 years and 100 or something? Like, is that outside would that be completely just ridiculous to think that he does? Maybe it is, but regardless, even if he's like the extension of it all, like, it does give you a little bit of flexibility towards, well, Towns is on the books, we know, for another 3 seasons. Kevin Durant has 1. So it's a risk, but it does increase your flexibility in theory, should things go sideways.
Yeah, I think, if you're against the idea that Durant is just a better overall proposition than Towns is for the next 3 years at roughly similar money, you're making durability arguments, which is like, that's fair. It's just given the age difference. You're making, you might even be concerned that, like, well, the timeline of Durant becoming disenchanted with his team seems to be accelerating. And so, like, we might get 18 months out of this before we have to try to trade him. But just from an on-court perspective, and like bang for buck perspective and ceiling perspective, like, Kevin Durant as your second option in a playoff series is just more valuable than Towns. And then if the defense is a wash or favors Durant at all, then, like, what are we talking about? It's easy. Age 39 season at the end of that deal, you're saying, like, that's something.
Would you rather have Towns at 3 for 71, knowing the ages, or KD at 3 for 177? It's basically the same money. So would you rather have Kevin Durant or Karl-Anthony Towns for the next 3 years? That's a real question. We're not dismissing that at all.
No, and it might be bad money at the end either way. So maybe the lens to look at it through is, like, in 25-26, are the Knicks more dangerous with KD at the 4 and Mitchell Robinson at the 5, or what they had this past year with Cat? And I think and maybe that's the right way to look at it, because this is a year-to-year business. Like, who knows what's going to happen 2 years from now? And it, like I said, it's possible that Durant is that's a bad value in year 2 and 3. With Towns, it's kind of already a bad value. So, and it's not going to get better, I wouldn't think, in year 2 or 3 of these next 3 years on their deals. So even if it's just we're way better next year, or we're marginally better next year as the Knicks because we have Durant and not Towns, then, like, you do that. Now, and it takes two. Are the Suns, like, do the Suns want to do that?
I was going to say that John Gambadoro, the reporting from him is that they don't want Karl-Anthony Towns. So now, and for Knicks fans that think, why would you ever give up Karl-Anthony Towns for Kevin Durant? Could you even get Kevin Durant for Karl-Anthony Towns? Like, you need another team then to value Karl-Anthony Towns. And if he's as valuable as I think a lot of people think that he is relative to Kevin Durant's age, well, then in theory, you should be able to get enough stuff to where not only do you get KD, but maybe there are some other assets coming back your way. And I just don't think that would be the case. Do I think a cat for KD construction that involves a third or fourth team, one of which would value Towns more than the Suns, is possible? I would think, yeah, especially if Kevin Durant wants to go to the Knicks, like, he will go to the Knicks. And the other thing here, too, is I know the reporting from Stefan Bondi of the New York Post and some other beat writers is the Knicks aren't in on KD. I want to say, I mean this with beat reporters have, like, one of the hardest jobs in the world when it comes to covering this league. When it comes to trade rumors, I do defer to, like, the Shamses, the Mark Stein, like, the Jake Fishers. When it comes to, like, knowing the ins and outs of the team, like, yeah, you defer to the beat reporters for sure. So I absolutely believe that the Knicks they made an offer for KD at the trade deadline. We know that for a fact. So what changed from the trade deadline? But how are the Knicks better off? It's and where you get into just, oh, should they do it, is now if it's not going to be Cat and you're talking about sending out, like, it has to be basically two of OG, Mitchell Robinson, Mikal Bridges, or Josh Hart. It's sort of like, no, you can't do that. Even if you're okay with giving up Hart, you can't get there with just Mitch. And then it's giving up OG or Mikal. Like, it's just, we were talking about how shallow they were. Now they're going to get shallower and older. No, you can't do that.
No.
Talking about the next phase of just, like, what does this team need? What are some targets they should go after? What are, to you, Grant, you're identifying the single biggest need for this team? What is it?
So we have a list up here if you're watching on YouTube. I jump first to another ball handler, which is the second item. Could say another big is obviously if they do trade Towns, you're going to need a backup big, especially given Robinson's health history, and like if it's for Durant, like Durant's probably not playing center. Although the Suns, you could do it for spot minutes against the right lineups. But to me, like, and maybe the coaching change handles this too, maybe because it empowers Bridges a little more or whatever. Just somebody else so Brunson isn't pounding the air out of the ball all the time. And to me, that's the main thing. Just because, like, I don't know, the backup big, not that hard to find. Depth pieces, relatively speaking, easier to find. More 3-point shooting, that's a need as well. Somebody else to make plays, I think, is the standout issue. Do you agree with that? I don't know if we've ever like organized them in a hierarchy.
The hierarchy is tough because I think they just need general depth, but I actually think that, like, doesn't it feel like they need another big? Because I'm looking at this I'm looking at this through the lens of saying, how do you build a really good defense with Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, like, in the same lineup? And it kind of seems like Karl-Anthony Towns needs to be playing alongside another big for that to happen, or you need to get someone like that you don't have the assets to get, like a Herb Jones or a Toumani Camara.
Don't you think it's possible that, like, I guess I keep in all my hypotheticals, like, Towns just isn't involved, like, where it's just like OG can play the 4, Bridges is the 3, you have another wing defender with a decent amount of size. Like, it doesn't have to be a big. You need a big I think for me, like, I'm viewing the other big as like, this is a second big, or I guess a third if Cat is there, and like those are just easier to find. So maybe the need is greater than I'm giving it credit for. I just think it's easier to fulfill that need than it is to go find someone else that's like, you're on the ball for 16 minutes a game, like, make stuff happen. Like, that guy's hard to find.
Do you think that, so let's say they can access the mini mid-level exception, which again, as we went over, there's not necessarily a guarantee that they can. Like, what are you looking at with that? Like, is that getting you in the Malcolm Brogdon? No, right? That's not getting you Malcolm Brogdon. Is he even what you want? Like, I think for the value, yeah, you just do it. But is that, when you're thinking of that ball handler type, is that even who you want to fill that role?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be too picky at the mini mid level, right? Like, that's just $5.7 million. It's more than the minimum, but it's not. I mean,
and for some guys, it's not really that much more than the minimum. Like, what is the minimum for a contract? Like the 10 plus, like $3.4 million or so. It's not that much more.
I mean, Brogdon is just getting thrown around so much this offseason. Like, I don't know what's Tyus Jones going to get, and how much of an upgrade, all told, is Tyus Jones over Campaign, especially if he's only playing a handful of minutes every game. I think he's better, but like, D'Angelo Russell, no way for 5.7. I don't even know if, actually D'Angelo Russell would help. I think just to come in and like prop the offense up when Brunson's not there. You can't play them together. That's the other thing, is maybe your secondary ball handler, I don't know, if you really want bang for your buck, has to be someone that could play with Brunson, because that's kind of been part of the problem. But that's just more of a tactical thing where it's like the coach needs to be the one to sort of democratize the offense, and you can just get a backup point guard that's better. But I don't know. In the perfect world, I think you want someone that could play in relief of or next to, like a Bogdan Bogdanovic, like could play him with Trae Young when he was with Atlanta, could relieve Trae Young. Like, that's, you don't love the defense, but someone like that's like, yeah, he can actually be out there with your point guard and is a value add. But again, mini mid-level, good luck.
Right, and it's just, I don't know, like Dennis Schroeder probably can't play with Jalen Brunson, but that might be a mini mid-level name. And so if you want it to be like another ball handler, it feels like it would need to be addressed via trade. And then it's okay, if it's not the Towns type of scenario, it's probably Josh Hart. And so it's Josh Hart, and like, you're not going to get even Malik Monk, and like, if you give Josh Hart in swaps, that's not going to get you Malik Monk from Sacramento, is it?
Probably not. I mean, that might be close. Although, like, Sacramento is worse off in its shot creation and ball, like, point guard position than are they giving up Malik Monk? And then who's running the show? They don't have anybody right now. Devin Carter going to play 40 minutes a game as a second-year player next year.
Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. Run it back, Bulls. Bulls plus Sabonis.
Demonis Sabonis, just everything runs from the elbows again.
This is just, you can't, I mean, you could play these two together. He's a free agent. But, like, Chris Paul? Like, that would be, like, someone who could come and, like, provide some of, like, a nice offensive equilibrium during the non-Brunson minutes. But I don't like playing those two together. It could work offensively, especially with the way Chris Paul shot this past year. You just probably don't want to do it. They're so small.
I mean, can you get? He's already on his second deal, but like a Cole-Anthony type is like the level of player. But then that's going to have to be a Hart salary match too. Probably. What's Cole making?
For another
15?
team has to get in there because what are we going to make Orlando spacing even worse?
Right. Yeah. Josh Hart would fit in Orlando though, for the wrong reasons.
Can we get AJ Mitchell from the Thunder? How do we do that? I would take him.
Well, yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's. Can you? I don't even know what the Knicks picks are like, or can you trade for a pick and take like a late first rounder or like a second round guard that's gonna? I mean, then it's just
what
like,
would it take? This
why
I know you'll
just play more.
Right, Kolek would be not. I know you'll support this, but can you get enough picks or like give enough value to get Scottie Pippen Jr. from Memphis?
He'd be great. I mean, I had him in sixth man of the year, like top 3 all season. Yeah, someone like that would be phenomenal. And I think defensively, you might be able to play him with Brunson. You'd be super small, but like that's an option too.
In terms of bigs, I've wondered if like do the Knicks kind of have a leg up if they're pitching free agents by saying, and this is a weakness, but they could use it as a strength, where technically, if you don't mind bringing Mitchell Robinson off the bench and you want Josh Hart on the bench to begin with, it's, we have a starter spot right here, Al Horford. You want to come, like, for the many Boston's cutting call, like, is that something that is, or even Steven Adams?
Brooke
I guess then Brooke Lopez, you do run into the issue by doing that of saying if you're probably trying to stagger Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson, they're both coming off the bench, like, it's a little trickier. But I've wondered if, like, those guys feel like they should have more than the mid-level available, but if it's not by much, and the Knicks are saying, like, hey, we have a starter's role here, I'm wondering if that could matter a little bit.
I mean, it should, right? Like, because that's how you end up getting paid more later, is if you're logging enough minutes to have the numbers and showcase yourself. Like, I think there's a whole class, like if it's Jay Huff, just to keep picking off Memphis players as someone that if you're I mean,
Zach Edey, when he's healthy, is he available?
Yeah, I mean, buy low, I guess, or can you buy low on a lottery guy? Just be like, we'll pay you to rehab for 6 months instead of whatever 4 to 5. You gonna call Portland and see if, I mean, Ayton's way out of the price range, but like RW3, Duop Reith, like you would assume Portland's going to trade one of those guys. Get on the phone to Dallas. Just give us Gafford, not getting Derek Lively probably. All these guys are. Josh Hart just has to go out in a bunch of these because you're the mini mid level. We're talking about trades, but I just don't know how you get. I struggle to come up with a name that's like a clear massive upgrade. I think. Doesn't it feel most likely that it'll be like a minimum guy, like not the Biyombo class, but like just a half step above that is going to wind up being the backup?
The best player they could acquire via trade or free agency if we're moving on from Kevin Durant is Al Horford. Like that just feels like the best possible player, and it still feels like a long shot. I was going to ask though, is there just based off the assets they could have, or maybe they're turning swaps? Like, can you get Colin Sexton? That would be a pretty big upgrade off the bench.
Yeah, or say Jordan Clarkson, if we're just going to talk about Utah expiring contracts for scoring guards.
John Collins, can he play point?
Collins, third big. I don't know. Like, the more we talk about it, the more it seems like, and maybe this is a good way to get into who's most likely to be traded, like, Josh Hart just kind of keeps coming up for the range of guy that they might be looking at if you're talking trade. Just someone that makes... in the high teens or mid to high teens, it's going to have to be Hart, isn't it?
I probably agree because I don't think you can like it went from we were including Mitchell Robinson in any midseason trade possible to now you can't trade that guy. Yeah, you can't trade him. So and I don't see a scenario in which you trade Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby and get better. I don't see even if you were, I guess if you were to trade them for Giannis would be the one, but the Knicks just are, like Giannis would have to go full James Harden or Jimmy Butler to get to the Knicks. So it has to be Hart, but that runs into like, who is the team that's, I think Josh Hart's a very useful player. He's also an emotional bellwether for this team, but I don't know that he would have a ton of outside value.
I think he's worth way more to the Knicks than he is to other teams. I think that's right. Because it's like, it's much easier to just think of different skill sets in a similar like price range. Like Malik Monk, you just mentioned, is like, yeah, he needs to go to Orlando or somewhere that needs a like scoring guard. It's like, who needs the guy that's really good at offensive rebounds and playing hard and pushing in transition for that pay rate? It's like, well, the Knicks seem to, but you're right. Like that player type is paradoxically like, yeah, Josh Hart's pretty portable, but also like that. Like, I don't know what team sees a need. Like that's the kind of needs you get fulfilled by like a hustling ninth guy, as opposed to someone that's like this key piece for the Knicks. So like the value discrepancy is pretty big there. So the reason I just kept mentioning him is because like the money that like his salary just kind of works for a lot of the type of players we're talking about.
Yeah, I think like Utah would be a good example of where they probably don't mind having that salary on the books, and they could use someone who will give a damn on the defensive end on the perimeter. But it's like that he just runs so counter to their timeline, and it's what are you like Josh Hart and swaps for Colin Sexton? Does that get them thinking about it? Maybe you throw in a Tyler Kolek or a Pacome Dadier, and then it's now we paid all that for an expiring Collins. They're in such a weird spot. So you think they're most likely to be traded is Josh Hart?
I mean, the other option I think is just Cat, and that presumes that a Durant deal is happening, which we've talked about that a fair amount. That just Cat's salary is there? So
sorry,
big.
Right. I was going to say, is there just a scenario where are you breaking Karl-Anthony Towns up into 2 or 3 players? It's not another star.
I mean,
like what if
that might solve a lot of problems? Honestly,
right.
It hits the depth. It might get you the ball handler, and you might get a backup big out of it. It's just where is that happening?
Okay, I'm going to give you one. I don't know. The money is so not going to work here, though. Karl-Anthony Towns to Toronto for Jakob Poeltl, Ochai Agbaji, and then more money. I don't know where that money's coming from.
RJ Barrett back. RJ Barrett facilitates now. I don't know if you know. He could be your secondary ball handler. I mean, honestly, there's value to me in just not having to deal with Towns' contract anymore. Don't you think? Wow. Don't you think the Knicks... Well, we just spent a bunch of time talking about this crazy extension. Like, at some point... Yeah, I mean, that's pretty low return.
Here's a deal.
Still.
If they're serious about rebuilding, continuing to build around Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum and Herb Jones for Karl-Anthony Towns.
I kind of like that one. That's kind of fun. And Cat is like, we kept trying to send Miles Turner to New Orleans for 100 off seasons. Cat kind of doesn't scratch the defense. How bad is that defense with him there? And no Herb. Yeah, I do that if I'm the Knicks, don't you?
I get you still then need to get a big at that point, but that's the avenue they could go. If we really wanted to cop out, we could say most likely be trades like PJ Tucker or Precious Achiuwa in a sign and trade or something like that.
Yeah, probably the answer probably is Achiuwa. Just that's the easy one. It's harder Cat, I think, for me.
You have anything else on this team, or are you ready to take us out of here?
I think that's a lot of good talk about the Knicks. I don't feel like I'm any closer to understanding how they'll get better or if they'll get better. But thanks everybody for listening, for watching. Remember, wherever you're consuming this, rate, review, subscribe, leave us a positive review. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're communicating with us there. Leave us some comments, questions, all that good stuff. Make sure you're subscribed there as well. Join our Discord. Links for that are in the YouTube and podcast description. Please, word of mouth helps. Tell your friends about the podcast. Tell your enemies, even if they don't like it. We'll take the subs. That's going to do it for us. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.